pity is easy. You look at someone and you feel bad for them and you're like, oh, poor thing. And then just leave it as is. When you have empathy for someone, you're really standing by them, right? You share those feelings. It's not being wrong. It's understanding the like how to remove the barriers towards my happiness. What a very great like reciprocal nature of like this work. I can support others, others are supporting me, and then it continues on and on and on.
From SGI USA, I'm Cassidy Bradford, and this is Buddhability, the weekly series where I talk with Buddhists from all walks of life about the power we each have to change our lives and the world around us. Welcome to Buddhability. Thank you so much for joining. As I say to all my guests, I really am looking forward to this conversation, especially some people that know either of us from school. We actually went to school together, but didn't know each other all that well. So this has been, even just in our conversations on the phone, been really great to connect with you. So I'm looking forward to, you being able to share your story. Just to open things up, you can introduce yourself. So just tell me a little bit about who you are and maybe also your life growing up.
Sure. I'm Yurika Watanabe. I'm from San Diego right now, but I was born and raised in Guam, and then went to school in Orange County. So clearly I have a love for the ocean and the beach, even though I can't swim, but I like being near it. I know,
Wait,
interesting
what?
Fun fact. I can't swim growing up on an island the whole time. Yeah, but I really love being near the ocean, so clearly I've stayed by the coast. But yeah, I was born and raised in this practice of Buddhism. So I've been surrounded by this philosophy and the values my whole life. But Guam is primarily Catholic. So it was very interesting being the only Buddhist in my school for most of my school years, aside from my sister, who doesn't count as the other person who's a Buddhist. And so it was very interesting and really cool learning about different religions and different practices. But certainly it was kind of strange when we would have school parties and the first thing we'd all do is bless the food. And as the only Buddhist, I'm like, oh, I don't bless food. I just eat my food. So, just really learning from other people, learning from my classmates, and just understanding the culture and the practices growing up, and then also being able to confidently share what Buddhism looks like as someone who's like very mixed in culture, and just being able to openly share about that with my friends as well. I would say that my background and growing up is kind of like a hodgepodge of all these different people, cultures, food.
Yeah, totally. It's so, I have to admit, I do not know that much about Guam. And so I grew up in very suburban Illinois, very Christian. So I was, of course, the only Buddhist, but I don't know why my impression of Guam was it must be really varied in, religion and spirituality, but I didn't realize it was such a Catholic country. And what it was the culture like growing up in Guam,
Yeah, it's very family oriented. The family values, it's very, very strong. The family connections, right? Having that is such an integral part of society in Guam. And I think that was the biggest shift that I had to make moving to California, was that people are very independent, friendly, definitely, but independent, right? Once you reach a certain age, you just kind of move out on your own and do your own thing. And then you get together for family events. But for Guam, I think even your family friends are your aunts and uncles, or your best friends are considered your cousins, or there's so much family gatherings, and they're not family by blood. And I think that was such a very critical part of my life, because I needed to be surrounded by people who really cared for me and nurtured me, aside from just my parents and my sister and my extended family, but really having that support system. And I think that was something that I really wanted to carry over in my life now, is how do I also build support systems for people who I love, people who I'm close to. But then also I think food is so important. Like, Guam has a very strong history of like colonization. So there's a lot of like Spanish influences. But I think because of that, right, like food has always been the central part of every single gathering, any type of get together, right? It's always food.
I'm really glad, like, I didn't know what you were going to answer. And I think, like, it's really, I feel a very crucial kind of part of your story is like this foundation and community and family. And I'm wondering, of course, today we're going to be talking about how you discovered and then really went for your passions and your dreams. So, as a kid, kind of growing up in this environment and culture, what did you imagine your future would look like? And what is it, what did it look like for your family, your friends?
It's it's a very interesting question because when I think about my childhood and my dreams back then and then who I am now, it's so different. I think the intention was the same, but the the ideas were very much different, right? So growing up, my parents, I talk about food because that's how my parents met, and they both worked in hotels, like in the restaurants at the hotels, and everything was just centered around food. So they had this dream of opening up a restaurant, like some type of food business on their own. And they finally did when I was in middle school. And so we were so happy that, they get to be their own boss. They get to cook the foods that they love and they get to share it with other people. And then, like, during that time, that's when the recession hit in around like 2008. And so it was such a struggle because my parents absolutely poured everything into this dream, and they had so much support from their friends, right? But that doesn't change the economy. It still affected them. So there were times where my sister and I would help out with their business. They opened every single day, but they also served at like a food night market once a week. And so my sister and I would go there to help, right? But then we wouldn't come home until like 2 o'clock in the morning. And then my school started at 7 a.m. And so I was always late for one class. I was always missing homework. And so I went from being a straight A honor roll student to like flunking a bunch of classes, right? So much so that teachers had to, call me and pull me aside to talk to me about my grades and asking me if everything's okay. And so I'm just crying in school because I'm embarrassed, right? I don't know how to tell them that like my family is struggling financially, and there was just so much family discord tied with finances and then thinking about my future. So middle school to high school was when that really came out. And so, of course, that was also the time that I was thinking about college. And all of my classmates were talking about what they were going to do, what university they were going to apply for. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I could go to college. I didn't know if I could afford it. And then I also didn't want to be the only person who didn't go to college out of my group of friends. I was just thinking like, oh, well, I took an accounting class in high school. I'm good at it. My parents are struggling financially, so therefore I should be an accountant. And it was very simple, a simple formula for me to follow, until some of our family friends in the Buddhist community visited us. And it was right before I was about to apply to colleges. And they had asked like, oh, what are your dreams? Like, what do you want to do? So I told them my plan. I was going to be an accountant, help out my family business. And then they asked like, well, what are your dreams that's not solving someone else's problems? Right? And that stunned me because I didn't know what that meant for me. I never thought outside of that. I just always felt that this is the easiest path for me to follow. So then when I really thought about like, well, what if I want to do something else? What does that look like? Can I afford it? Can I actually go to somewhere else outside of Guam? Like, traveling outside of Guam is so expensive. Guam is a tropical island, but it's actually pretty far from Hawaii. It's closer to Japan than it is from Hawaii. So just the plane tickets getting from Hawaii to California or anywhere else in mainland US is so expensive that most people tend to stay in Guam, right? And I think I was content with staying, which, I mean, it's not a bad problem to have when you're in a tropical place. But I think I became content with what I thought the future would look like. So when I was asked that question, I really thought like, well, maybe there is something that I want to do. I just don't know what it is. So they encouraged me to try to go to Soka University of America. They had a scholarship for free tuition if your family made a certain or hit a certain threshold, right, for the income. And I was like, well, my family meets that, but how can I get there? And can I get there, right? I was failing a bunch of classes. I was like, I can't get into a private university. I can't go to any university at this point. So during my senior year, I really challenged to ace my classes. And like, even if I'm not like a top student, but I wanted to prove that I can change my whole situation. So I went from having like a bunch of C's and D's in high school to having like over a 4.0. Everything was like 110% for all of my classes. And I didn't think it was possible, but I built such great relationships with my teachers and just being really honest and sincere about my situation, that they were so supportive and really gave me the space to do extra work, but also a space to learn, right? And to catch up with everyone else. And then during that time, I applied to Soka University. But my parents didn't go to college. They didn't go to a university that required SATs or essays. Like there wasn't really any support for what that looked like, right? So I didn't know that I had to ask for recommendations from teachers. I didn't know that that was a thing. I didn't know how to write essays for myself. I didn't know how to take SATs and the timeline for it. So there were so many things that I didn't know that when I submitted my application, it was incomplete. And I felt bad that I was rejected because I was like, oh, see, I can't do it. Like, clearly, I just can't go anywhere else. But then, you know, a family friend had encouraged us, like, and really encouraged me, like, don't give up, because if it's your dream, then you should fight for your dream, right? You should keep going until you feel accomplished in whatever path that looks like. I took a gap year after high school, and I just said, like, okay, I really want to go to this university, and I just want to have an opportunity to go. So I had applied, and I was waiting for admission or the decision. And during that time, that's when our Buddhist community was hosting peace festivals all throughout the US, right? And these were major festivals happening in large cities. So everyone was planning to go and travel. But for Guam, it was too expensive, right? And a lot of people were also struggling with poverty and just like family discord, illnesses, like so many barriers to getting out of Guam to travel to these peace festivals. But then as a group of friends, we were like, well, why not just do one here? If we can't afford to go, we could afford to host a peace festival here, right? Something that's really unique to Guam. And unique to the youth here. It was like a handful of us. So me and my sister and a bunch of our friends, and we said, like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do some, like, we're not dancers, but we're going to learn how to dance. And we don't know how to sing, but we're going to learn how to sing. And, you know, just thinking about, like, what kind of festival do we want that is centered around peace, but is also unique to our generation. We started asking around, like, we had some friends who knew a choreographer, and so that person helped us, like, you know, set up some of the dances that we wanted to do. And then we had other people who knew how to play instruments. So then they called their friends. And, you know, it was through word of mouth that everyone just started joining in. It just felt like everyone was getting ready for a big party. And we're all going to celebrate what peace looks like in Guam as young people. And so we went from like a handful of people to like over 100 young people there, right? And so we had like so many youth in the space, and we're like, oh, we didn't know that there were so many people who we know, right? And people who we got to connect with and build friendships. At the end of it, the I guess the greatest problem that we had was like, oh, what are we going to do next? Like, what's going to be the next thing that we get to do as youth? And we just built so many great friendships and connections and so many memories, right? That it became easy for youth to think like, oh, this is what peace can look like. Like, this is what it could look like in a place like Guam, where it has such a harsh history, right, of war and violence and colonization, but that from this moment on, all of the youth in Guam can actually do something towards peace, right? And it can be something through the arts or something through like food or, poetry, like whatever it is, right? That youth can really stand together and then create peace in their own environments. So it was such a huge moment in my life. So during that time, that's when I also received my acceptance to Soka University. So I got to be the first student from Guam to attend. When I got that email, right, I was so happy because I felt proud that I could break through these barriers that I thought were barriers, right? And when I told my parents, of course, we're all crying because that meant that we had to be separated, right? That I had to live in California and they had to live in Guam, and that we would be apart. And having like those strong like family ties, it was such a hard transition. But I just felt so proud and honored that like I can really represent Guam in that way, and I can bring the culture and the values that I've grown up with and be able to share it with people. And then also like show that I wasn't limited by like finances or any type of like race or gender barriers that like normally have limited me in the past. Through this like belief and values that we hold in Buddhism, right, of having this like courage to persevere, it just like proved to me that I could really break through all of that, right? That these barriers don't define who I am, and really they are opportunities for me to expand. It was really the first time that I had to challenge my life, and I had to push myself to decide what I wanted to do, and not wait for someone else to tell me what to do or wait for something else to happen, right? That I know that I can make it happen.
It's so incredible that just in the span of those like kind of 2 years, right? Like senior year of high school and then that gap year, that so much could really shift for you. But I think like when you're that age too, your life is just like, I mean, it's really challenging, but like you're also just changing so rapidly. It sounds like at that time there was some sort of like deepening in some way of like understanding Buddhism and what it looks like really applied. So yeah, I'm just curious kind of what that experience was like during those years.
Yeah, it's definitely as a teenager practicing Buddhism, normally like in our teenage years, like I don't want to do anything. Like for me, I'm sure there are other teenagers who are like very much determined and driven to do what they want to do. But definitely during that time, like my parents had to tell me what to do. Like going to Buddhist activities, it was part of our family activities. Like it was part of our rhythm. But it was because like my parents told me to, right? So that part was routine. But I think when I really decided that I wanted to go to Soka University, that's when I had to chant for myself, right? And not have to rely on my parents to tell me when to chant. And I really had to understand like, why do I practice Buddhism, right? So even making that decision to go to college was like, I think the first time in my life that I really questioned so many parts of my life, because I really had to understand, like, what am I doing all of this for, right? What is the purpose? Is it just for me to do something that like my family has done for so many years? Like when we talk about happiness and creating peace, what does that actually mean, right? And what does that mean for someone who's like in high school and trying to go to college? Like, and so I really had to analyze those parts of my life and just understand. But of course, I'm an overthinker. So then I'll overthink everything. And then I start having like a whole like crisis and like a
Mm-hmm.
whole existential crisis. And I'm like, why am I on this earth? And, you know, so to like really center my thoughts, really chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, like doing the morning and evening practice of chanting, really helped like streamline my thoughts, but also
Hmm.
really encouraged me to like understand myself first, right? And understand like what can I do to create happiness and peace, right? And like how do I challenge these obstacles in my life right now to be an example of happiness and peace for my own environment? And I think that's when I really understood what it meant to stand up as one person, even if you're
Hmm.
standing up alone, right? That like in this journey, it felt like I was alone because I really had to chant. Like no one
Mm-hmm.
else was going to do it for me.
Yeah.
And I had to challenge that. But then I also had to understand, like, okay, by breaking through these barriers, what does that mean for people around me as well? Like,
Hmm.
what am I doing to support and contribute to my own community? Right. And just being able to share that kind of confidence that, you know, my like socioeconomic status or my like racial identity or gender identity or all of these different things that I usually would feel ashamed about, right? Like I really had to look and understand that like this is nothing to be ashamed of, right? That these are just circumstances that happen, but these circumstances are my opportunities to show what happiness can look like even in all of these different spaces. um and
Hmm.
I think that's like all of that happening in the mind of like a 17-18 year old right?
Yeah.
And so really chanting every single day helped me to understand like my own courage and to find that courage that I already had, and to persevere, right? To not give up on myself. So when these peace festivals came out, right, the biggest lesson was like, how do you not give up on the person who's right in front of you, right? How do you connect to people in your own community for this one cause or this one event, whatever it's going to look like? And really understanding like what it meant to have empathy for people, right? Because when I talk about all of these circumstances in my life, like when I think about it, there's always that feeling of shame, right? There's always that feeling that like someone's going to look down on me because my family didn't have money, because like I couldn't afford to have these things, or because I look a certain way or I speak a certain way. And I think that's always part of the doubt that I have in my life, like any average person, right? But that peace festival really taught me how to have empathy for people, right? And not use pity as my driving force, right? And it's always that battle between pity and empathy, where pity is easy. You look at someone and you feel bad for them and you're like, oh, poor thing. And then just leave it as is, right? You hope the best for them, right? But then when you have empathy for someone, you're really standing by them, right? You share those feelings, you really understand where they're at, and then you meet them where they're at, right? And then you take it a step further towards empowerment. Like while I'm struggling with all of these like identity crises and just thinking about what the future would look like, that other people are also going through similar things, right? Like how can I really connect with them as well? And we can all win together, right? It's not just my victory or their victory, but we're really winning as a community and winning as people together. And so I think that was a time period where I really understood what Buddhism meant for me and what those values meant for me in action in society, and starting with my own goals and then with my friends and then expanding from there, right? It just became so natural and so organic to have that kind of connection with people. So I think because of that experience, like it was such a crucial foundation for my life,
Yeah.
and everything after was just really building off of that.
I something that really struck me is like you sharing that you get to show what happiness looks like in your personal circumstances, which I really love because I think yeah, sometimes we can sort of have this idea of like, oh, well, I can only be happy if like these things are true about my life. But actually, like what happiness looks like in my life is unique from what it looks like in your life. You know, chanting about like what does happiness look like in my own life is so exciting and empowering, and realize like it comes from me, not, to your point, like other people telling me what is going to make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I too, like when I was closer to like around 20 and I really started chanting, had that same sort of experience of like really needing to reflect on like, who am I? How do I want to live my life? Like somehow that really like opened my life up to be able to like take time and really like get to know myself in a more yeah, just like a deeper way. I'm curious now, you know, you left for college and you mentioned like this time in your life was really the foundation for everything that would happen afterwards. So maybe you can just tell me, like, once you made it to college, you know, did you know, oh, this is what I want to study, this is what I want to pursue, clear dream, or was it like, I'm going to take some classes and find out?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely the latter. So when I went to Soka University, I was really appreciative of the curriculum because you get to take a class in almost everything, right? And then you decide like in your second year. And so I really liked that I had options and that I could just explore and not worry about it for a while and then think about it 2 years down the road. There was just so much opportunity, and I really understood why our family friends had said, like, you know, think beyond what you know. Because I really didn't know a lot, right? And so when I started taking more classes, the one course that stood out to me was a human rights course. It stood out to me because I have never heard the concept of human rights, right? And I didn't know what that meant. And you know, you know about like law and like all the legal field because there are so many TV shows about it.
Yeah.
Right? You watch one episode of Law and Order SVU and you're like an expert in law. And so I think that, like, for me in my mind, when I hear about rights, I think about that, right? But then when I really learned more about human rights, I was like, oh, you really can fight for like basic necessities, like access to clean water, access to clean air, even having a toilet. Like really understanding that there's so much consideration for what a good quality of life should be. And so in my mind, I was like, of course, this makes sense. Like everyone should have access to clean things. Like that should be a given. And then understanding like the politics of our world, right? And just knowing that because people, right? People are diverse. People have very different perspectives. That, of course, there's going to be very different approaches or attacks on different basic needs. And so that whole field just fascinated me. I thought, like, wow, this is incredible that there's a place where you can really just address like basic necessities for a human being. Because of that interest, I wanted to get a master's degree in something with human rights. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know yet. I just learned about it. I just want to know more about it.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here in San Diego, because I had moved right after Soka University to San Diego to go to the University of San Diego's Kroc School of Peace and Justice Studies. So I got my master's in Peace and Justice Studies, and I thought it was such a cool program because a lot of the conversations were very much, they had so many ties to Buddhism, right? Unintentionally, right? And I thought that was so amazing how interconnected that is. We had a class on conflict resolution, right? Conflict resolution and international negotiations. And we would role play as like different international players and then try to negotiate and get through a conflict together, right? And even in those conversations, like I could pull on a lot of Buddhist values and so in those conversations in my master's program, it felt so natural because everything aligned with Buddhism, like what it really meant to value a person, right? What it meant to understand people as people and to know that the complexities of people can make certain situations challenging, right? But they can also unite people at the same time. So really recognizing like what it meant to interact with other individuals and different viewpoints and perspectives. When I graduated with my master's, and then, all the lessons that I learned from Soka University and University of San Diego, I was like, I'm going to solve all the world's problems. I'm going to change the world, and I'm going to fix everything. And I was really interested in homelessness because San Diego has the fourth largest homeless population in the entire US. And so you can see a lot of people who are living unsheltered. And I thought, like, what is happening? Like, why? What's going on, right? And so when I started exploring different career paths, nonprofits is what came up. And so I started volunteering with nonprofits. I did, I took on different roles with different nonprofits, and learned the different approaches to homelessness. And then, like, I was so jaded by that point after a few years in. I was like, this is terrible. Like, it seems like there's no end to anything. And, then I went through like my second round of an existential crisis. I'm like, why am I doing all these things? What is the point of everything? Right. But I really had to go back to my core values of like, what does it mean to empathize and empower, right? In my own community? Like, how do I do that starting from myself? Right? That I'm not going to solve the world's problems, but how do I start with just one person? Even if it's just me, how do I start with myself? But really going back to like, what does Buddhism look like in daily life? Right? And it's very simple, but I think that kind of understanding of humanity really helped guide my career path, right? That I now work in a nonprofit that's like the regional agency for homelessness in all of San Diego County, right? And really works with a lot of like federal and state level and local level like funding and agencies and initiatives. And so a lot of the work that I get to do is like so in line with everything that I've learned, not just in school, but also in my daily life, like what I learned in my Buddhist meetings and activities and what I learned from my friends and my neighbors. And I think just recognizing that homelessness is already like the end result, right, of every failure in our system. And if we can't recognize the people who are experiencing that, right, then how can we really address every other areas of our lives? And so it like really taught me to understand like humanity in all different areas. Like, what does humanity look like when you've already hit bottom? What does empathy and empowerment look like, right? That it's very easy to pity people who are experiencing homelessness, but through my Buddhist practice, right, and through like all the challenges that I've also gone through, like understanding that like, yes, this is what it means to empathize with someone. This is what it means to empower someone. It's really just recognizing their humanity, right? Even in the worst of situations, how do we recognize the humanity of one other person? So I think that kind of journey it's been, recognizing the connections between like my childhood and just seeing how like, I've been developing that kind of core value and set of beliefs for myself through all of these experiences, right? And they all start to make sense from my first existential crisis in high school to now, like understanding that like, it's because I really wanted to understand what humanity is. And now I can really see that like I can be an example, right? Just like everyone else. And through my Buddhist practice, I can really embody these values of like courage and perseverance and confidence and wisdom. So it's like my long-winded way of explaining that.
No, I mean, it's great. As you were talking there, I was thinking of a couple of things. The first is like hearing you just talk about like really being able to see people in their humanity. It just reminds me, the core value of the Lotus Sutra is that all people possess this Buddhahood, this enlightenment in their life. No matter who you are, you mentioned earlier all of these like aspects of your identity, right? Like those don't mean like you have less Buddhahood, right? And same with people that like you could easily pity, right? But instead, you know, we really believe every single person has this value in our life, and we can't always see it, you know, so sometimes
Right.
like we have to chant to really bring out this like compassion from our lives and empathy. And I was wondering, like, working for such a like lofty kind of goal and dream and challenging something that's so big, I know so many of my friends and family feel really overwhelmed with like, look at all of the problems going on in the world. How can I make a difference? So,
Right.
how do you challenge that kind of falling into that? How do you bring hope out of your life? I'm assuming there are moments where you feel really defeated.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Whew. I mean, if not, I want to know your secret, but like, how do you navigate those feelings and have confidence that what you're doing is really meaningful?
Right. Yeah, I love that you brought that up, right? Because it's so, I think the expectation, especially working in like a social service type of field, right, is that like you never burn out or you're always burnt out. And I think it's always
Mm,
like one extreme,
yeah.
right? And I think it's natural because if you're supporting someone else, right, it takes a lot out of you
Yeah.
because you can see their situation and sometimes you can see a solution and they can't see it, or
Mm,
you are fighting for a solution and there's so much red tape to try to get through it and then it feels hopeless to even go down that route. Sometimes you have to abandon solutions, right, because
mm,
it's just not going to work. And I feel that with Buddhism, right, it has always taught me that there's no effort that's wasted.
hmm.
Right. So even if I don't accomplish everything in one day, that I can't feel bad about it because there's always the next day or the next day, right? And even if something didn't go the way that I wanted it to, that it'll work out in the best way because I'm going to make it work out in the best way, that it's going to
Hmm.
happen, right? That I'm not waiting for a solution. So even if something didn't work, I'll try something else. And then I think you pair that, right, with the empathy and compassion for
Hmm.
people and really understanding like a person as a whole, right? Giving space to a person to be. Understanding my own humanity has been the starting point for me to
Hmm.
work through those challenges, right? That I'm not going to hold the weight of guilt or shame or fear or anger, right? And of course, as a person, you will like you're going to feel all these feelings, and not all days are going to be great. But Buddhism has really taught me like what it meant to enjoy every single moment
Hmm.
and take like make the most of every single moment. And I think that's what I have to always remember is that it is just a moment, right? And then the next moment will come. And because I have my Buddhist practice of like chanting in the morning and evening, right? Those are opportunities where I can always refresh. And it's not like wiping away everything, right? But that I can really process everything that has happened through my daily practice, right? And so when I'm chanting, I can really see my life for what it is, but also
Hmm.
recognize like the potential that I have, right? And if I can believe that in myself, then that means I can believe it for others and vice versa, right? That if I can see it in
Hmm.
other people, that means I can also see it in myself. So
Hmm.
that's like, I think the process for me to get through that. But of
Hmm.
course, I am human, so that doesn't happen every single day. Like
Yeah.
there are some days where I'm like, everyone else is better and I'm just not great at all, right? And
Hmm.
there's like so much doubt, and there will always be that like voice in my head that will tell me like you're not good enough, you're not doing enough, you're not like speaking in the right way, or you're not doing what's needed for the community. Like
Hmm.
there's always that doubt, but I have to like always refresh whenever I'm chanting, right? That's
Hmm.
the opportunity for me to awaken that courage that's already in me, right? And I have to tell myself like you've proven that before, right? That I've broken through
Yeah.
barriers before. Like why am I minimizing my efforts now? And why am I
Hmm.
limiting myself now? And so just starting from myself, then it becomes easier to understand other people around me as well. That's always a thought process of like you challenge your doubts and then you challenge these negativities, but then you want to see the positivity in someone else. And
Hmm.
so really like to prevent myself from overthinking and like
Yeah.
spiraling, right? It's really that daily practice, and then going to our Buddhist activities, our meetings, and connecting with people, and then studying, right? Like understanding Buddhism on a deeper level, like going deeper and deeper and learning more about like the Lotus Sutra and the writings. So yeah, like just that whole roller coaster sometimes that you like have to go through to recognize like where you're at and where you want to be. Yeah.
Do you have any like dreams now? Like thinking back to when you were like, oh, maybe I will apply for college, like being challenged to have dreams. Do you have any big dreams right now?
That is a great question. I think it's I think my dreams have been I guess it's not necessarily like a material type of dream, right? But
Yeah.
I think I have like so many goals for myself, like even just like on a confidence level, or like just feeling proud of my work, like how can I really make an impact in my community? Just understanding like not to be content with where I'm at right now, right? And like and sometimes I'm content because I'm scared of what the next step is going to look like.
Yeah, me
Right. And
too.
like, yeah, right. It's like you don't know what it's going to be. So then you're like, maybe I should just not do more because maybe this is the best. Right. And maybe I should just maintain this. What really struck me was at the beginning of 2024, it was like the year that I had made so many big goals. Right. And I had determined that like I'm going to like get a house, or I'm going to like get a new job where I'm going to get a better pay. And so like during that time my family was struggling financially, right? But also primarily because my mom was going through a lot of like long-term illnesses. And so after the holidays I came back and I had made that determination that like, you know, I'm going to accomplish all of these goals and dreams, and then our family is going to unite, right? Even more, that we're going to accomplish all the dreams that we've had, and we're going to break through all of these like financial problems that we like continue to face. And then the day that I was supposed to fly back to visit my family, right, my mom had passed. And so I was gonna fly in that evening, and then I got the call early in the morning that my mom had passed that morning. And so I think that like really rocked my world for that year, because I couldn't like I was still trying to wrap my mind around like life and death, right? And then also like thinking like, well, what's the point of all of these goals now? Like she's not here, and a lot of these things I wanted to do because I wanted to support her, right? And I wanted to be there for her. And so during that year, I was going to a lot of Buddhist activities. And, you know, I was like sharing encouragement with people and supporting so many young adults in San Diego. I would always think about how my mom also used to do that when she was like more like actively practicing and healthy, right? And that she also went to a lot of meetings, you know, visited a lot of friends, and just connected with a lot of people to support so many people in her life. And I felt so proud that I could do the same thing, right? But every time I'm thinking of that, like after every single meeting for a while, in my car, I would just be crying on my way home, right? Like so much so that at some point like my husband would be driving me from meeting to meeting, and then in between I'd just be crying and then start the next meeting or go home. And you know, and I think a lot of it was wrapped around grief, but also so much appreciation, right? So much appreciation for her life, that like because of my mom and because of how much she really showed what Buddhism looked like for someone who had like so much negative aspects affecting her, right? That like no matter what, she always used Buddhism as her foundation to keep moving forward, right? That there was always that recognition and awareness that her life was worth so much more. Seeing how much my mom had challenged and how much she still pushed through all the way until her last moment, it like I really recognize the appreciation. Like I had such deep appreciation for her life. So I'm like crying with appreciation and happiness and joy and sadness that I couldn't tell her about, like all the great people that I've met and all the meetings that I get to attend and like all these activities in my own community. And I think that like that had to be my process to really understand what it meant to make the most of every single moment, right? And to like, I guess, appreciate my mom in that way. I really wanted to show that like I'm going to make the most of my life, right? That I'm not going to give in to my doubts, right? But that I'm really going to prove that like this is what Buddhism looks like, right? Because Buddhism is happiness, Buddhism is peace. So this is what happiness and peace is going to look like, that I can really be happy with every single moment of my life, and that I can show that like because of my parents, this is the type of person who I am, right? Like this is the contribution that I can make to my community. And so in that same year, I was recruited to my current job, where I get to, I got I was really chanting for like a salary and benefits and like a work environment where I could really grow, like so many different things that I wanted for my life, so many goals that I set. And because of my mom's passing, right, I really understood like how to utilize every single moment towards my dreams, right? That my dreams won't stop because she's no longer here, but that instead they'll expand, right? That I'll go even bigger than what I thought. So when I was recruited to my current job, right, I got exactly the salary that I wanted, the benefits that I wanted, even the work environment, the work schedule, and the type of support system from my supervisors and my coworkers, and I get to do everything for the community. All of these benefits, in a sense, right? Like they are empowering me to do even more for my community. And I felt like, wow, what a very great like reciprocal nature of like this work, right? That like I can support others, others are supporting me, and then it continues on and on and on, right? And I felt like, yeah, I really want to show like this is the value of Buddhism, right? That like Buddhism isn't about like how much you chant or like the like what religion you believe in or all of that, right? That like ultimately religion serves to make people happy, right? And that through Buddhism I am going to be happy, and that I'm going to support others in being happy as well. And through my work, this is my way of doing that, right? But then through my own daily life, like deepening my appreciation for life itself and for humanity itself, and through my mom's example, like really seeing what appreciation looks like, and how can I still like carry on her love and her spirit in this way and through my own life. And so I think for my like where I'm at now, I think my goals are really more internal and just understanding like how can I really deepen appreciation for myself too, and not give into those doubts, right? And then not be fearful of what the next step would look like, and not be scared to make those like material goals as well, right? That like I am human and I do have to live in this economy and in this society. Like I do need all of these different benefits and needs, but that I'm not going to be scared. That as long as I'm really striving for happiness and peace, that I'm not going to fail, right? And I think that's what every person should really see in their lives, that their lives are so powerful that they're not going to fail either. I think that was like a very crucial moment where there's so much grief and sadness and just so much like wishes that I had for like wanting my mom to still be here, but then seeing that like even after her passing there's still so much that she's teaching me, and so much that I get to do because of her, right? So yeah, I think that's like where I'm at with my goals.
Wow, that's really, thank you so much for sharing that. Listening to you, I was like, wow, I really need to have like more expansive kind of, dreams and appreciation too. So interestingly or coincidentally maybe, last night I had a couple of friends over and we were studying the Buddhist perspective on like having gratitude and appreciation and repaying your appreciation. And yeah, we were just talking about how one of the ways to pay appreciation, or we call it repaying debts of gratitude to people that have really like poured into us, is through us really making our lives the most incredible and expansive, because all of the people that have supported us and cared for us did it because they believed in us and the capacity of our life, even when we didn't and still sometimes don't. But really, the way nothing would make those people happier than us becoming the most like joyful and strong version of ourselves.
Right.
And so I just have been reflecting on that a lot, because I think it's, to your earlier point, like kind of easy to be like, okay, this is good, I'm fine
Right.
here. But not losing sight of the ability to really dream and like challenge ourselves to be able to do that. So I'm so glad I asked that question. That was so just like very, really touched me, and really encouraged me. So I wanted to, kind of wind down with a question about advice. So, we talked about this kind of having dreams and how to live your life joyfully. So I'm wondering what advice you would give to someone who is struggling to, find out what their dream is, or maybe struggling to figure out like how they can like contribute to society. So yeah.
That is deep. I think there's so much. I think every generation of youth, right, have their own struggles and their own challenges, and you layer on like everything that happens in society, like economically and socially and politically, and I think with youth there's so much pressure sometimes that we put on ourselves, because we think that we have to have everything decided in that moment, that we have to know what we're going to do right before we go to college, because that's it, we're set for life. Right? I think that kind of pressure is really hard, because it's all internal. I guess not all internal, right? Sometimes there is external pressure, like people are like, you have to decide. But I think internally, that's always the biggest battle. Having absolute confidence that even if you like think that you made a wrong decision, that you can always pivot. There's going to be like ups and downs, twists and turns, but that you can't be so rigid, because you have to have absolute confidence in the power of your life, that you can adapt to these circumstances, but that you can also make the most value in these circumstances. And so I think like going back to like my childhood and, getting into college and then getting the jobs that I wanted, and even like being comfortable, like moving to San Diego in a new place where I didn't know anyone, I didn't have friends, like, I think all of these new environments and obstacles and challenges, like everything really taught me how to utilize my practice first and foremost, right? That like, because everything is internal, that means I really had to chant to understand like myself, in the sense of like, how do I really be honest with all the doubts and like negative tendencies that I have, right? That like sometimes chanting about that is really hard, because you don't want to admit that you're wrong. And like, I personally, like, I don't like it when I'm chanting and then there's like that voice in my head that's like, that was a poor decision, you were being selfish. And I'm like, no, I'm not.
No, I wasn't.
I'm not selfish, I can justify it because of X, Y, and Z. Right? There's always that defense, right? And we don't want to be wrong, but I'm still learning how to understand that like, it's not being wrong, right? It's understanding the like how to remove the barriers towards my happiness. And I think looking at it in that way was a better shift for me, because then I didn't feel guilty about it. I could really accept and take responsibility for things that I was like fearful of, or hesitant, or like, maybe I was like being arrogant about, right? so many of these negative tendencies, I had to be open and honest with myself. And
Mm-hmm.
really, chanting has been so helpful because that's like the one place that I could just be. That I could be every part of Yurika. That I could be
Mm-hmm.
good Yurika, bad Yurika, selfish Yurika, like scared Utica, like all of
Yeah.
these different parts of me that I could just be very open and accept that like this is part of my life, right? And it's not going to be the driving force of my life, these negative tendencies, but that
Hmm.
I can decide how I'm going to take the next step and that I want to do it in the most value creating way possible, and then having that confidence to know that I do have that strength, that I can actually do it. So like when I talked about like growing up in Guam, right? Like during that time, when I think about it now, it seems like a very short period of my life
Yeah.
where it's just like very simple. It's like, oh yeah, these bad things happened, and then I went to university, and then I went to grad school, and then I got a job.
Mm-hmm.
But like really thinking about the day-to-day struggle of it, where like when your family is fighting, like you don't want to be there, right? Like
Yeah.
you want to run away, you want to do all these things. Like when you don't have money and you want to hang out with your friends, right? Like you want to disappear, like you just want to like dissolve into the earth because you don't
Mm-hmm.
want people, like your own friends, to know that like you can't afford to go out, or that like we had utilities cut off at home because we couldn't pay like to keep up with utilities, and like you don't want people to know that like you couldn't do your homework at home because you had to go to a, well, now they don't have those, but like an internet cafe, and
Yeah.
you had to go to an internet cafe to do your homework and print it out there. Like, there's so many like little details in the day-to-day life that you like feel so embarrassed about, or you feel like ashamed or fearful, like so many things you want to hide. But I think like it's those moments where I could create more happiness, right? And that's where that peace festival came in. It was like, how do I create joy even when my daily life is not what I imagined it to be, right? And so I think when it comes to like youth transitioning from one step of their life to the other, right? It's going above that daily life, the circumstances of daily life, and recognizing that like these again are just the moments. They're just one moment after another, but it doesn't define the rest of your life, right? Like they become the foundation for your life. And so I think with youth who are like indecisive or don't know what they want to do, like for me, I think what was so helpful was to just go with what I was generally interested in without any fear, and to not be scared of what the next step might look like. Because no matter what direction you go in, you can always change that direction, right? And that's what Buddhism really teaches, is that that one moment can always change, right? There are so many possibilities of what that moment could turn out to be, and you get to decide what it's going to look like. And through chanting every single day, you open doors that you don't realize were even there. You go beyond what you see right now and really connect to every part of your environment and the universe, right? That like it's not magic, but it's really the power of your life and how you can impact everything around you and how you can transform everything around you. So, especially for young adults, like everything changes, right? Every moment is going to be different. So, there is no like bad decision in that sense of like you're never going to regret that because it's always going to transform somehow. So in my own unique way, like it's working in the field of homelessness, it's getting to know the youth in my neighborhood, and it's through like these types of connections, that's how I can create happiness and peace, right? But for every single person it's going to look different, and to be confident that like this is the path that my life needs to take because this is my foundation building up.